use an Invoke web service to do an API call in Microsoft Power Automate Desktop. We need to fill in some parameters. These are details about your API, and you will always have documentation around the API that you're trying to connect to. So what we're doing today is to connect to another system that will be an API a developer has built for us, where we can get data from, or even send data. The first one that we need is a URL. URL is often also called endpoint. So we go to our documentation. Today it's the Star Wars API, a demo API, which you will find at the swappy.info. Navigate to the documentation. Here we have a getting started and how we make our first API request. Copy this URL without the quotation marks. Then you go to Power Automate Desktop. Control V to paste it in. The method is get. We want to get some data from this API. Later we will talk about how we can send data to an API. What format will the response from this API comes in? And if I look at the documentation, I can also see a response here. This is in a JSON format. You can see that when it's a curly bracket in the start and in the end. And the data is sorted in key value pairs with a colon between, and double quotation marks and comma separated. Down here we will have an array that is this hard bracket. So this is a JSON. Change the XML with JSON. The variables produced, that will be the headers, the response here, and the status code. This is metadata about the request. This is the actual response which we will going to use. And the status code, how does this call go? Was it a success or did it face an error? Click run and you will see that we have a status code of 200. In the end here we have the web service response headers. Try to double click that. This is the metadata. We will not use it here. In the middle we have the web service response. Double click that. And we have information about Tatooine, which was ID 1 up here in the planets. Let's click close. Then we can also, if I go to the documentation and scroll a little bit down to resources, let's say we want information about the people in the Star Wars. Let's copy this URL. You often want to fetch information from systems that could be your customers or employees and get information into Power Automate Desktop. That's what we do here. Go back to Power Automate Desktop, open the Invoke web service, Control V, paste this one in, hit save, go say run. Another 200, double click the web service response, and here we will have information about Luke Skywalker, C3PO, R2D2, and all the characters here. Go back to the documentation and scroll a little bit down. We can also add an ID to this endpoint to get a specific character. That will be this one here. Open up the Invoke web service, Control V, or add a slash and 1. Say save. Go click run. Another 200, and if I double click here, I will see I fetch data about Luke Skywalker. It still comes in a JSON, so we still need to parse it. That is, to read the data. Let's say I want the name and the birth year. Then I need to find a way to get the data out here. We will get to that. Try to open up the Invoke web service again. Change 1 to, for example, 4. Hit save, hit run. Now, if I open up the web service response, I have fetched that weather data. When using the Invoke web service to make API calls here in Power Automate Desktop, you often want to do it over and over. Let's look at the data I prepared for today. On my desktop, I have a folder called Project with an Excel book called Data. We have a single sheet with a column called ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 8, and an 84. These are the IDs that we want to look up. We want to send these ID to the API, that will be the Star Wars API, and then we want results back and we want to parse them beautifully. Go to the project folder and right click, copy as path, go to Power Automate Desktop. Let's create a subflow. A subflow is a way of structuring your flow so you don't have a lot of actions here in main. It's also nice if we want to later reuse things. Go to Subflow, new Subflow. Let's call this initialization. Do it like this. And in here, we will have a set variable like this. Never call it new var. So what will this be? This will be our project path. In the value, Control V, remove the double quotation marks and say save. So whenever we start a flow, even though that we are here in the builder, it will always start from the main. Unless you do something, this subflow will not run. To make it run, you will find a run subflow, drag it in here in the start. In the dropdown, find your initialization here, and now it will run. Go into the initialization. Here we will have our variables. We will initialize the project path. I will also want to open up system and read data. So here, let's read the Excel. To open an Excel book, we will find the launch Excel and drag it in. We will not launch it with a blank document, but we want to open up the following document. The path. If I click the X, in the project path, that will be the folder. I have a backward slash, say data.xlsx. That will open up the data.xlsx in the project path. Scroll a little bit down here. Choose to make it visible nice when we develop. We avoid a few errors. When we're done, you can easily just untick it. This will open up an Excel instance variable called Excel instance. Hit save. Now you want to read from Excel worksheet. So here we read the data from this Excel book into a data table. The Excel instance is Excel instance. Retrieve all available values from worksheet. Also say we have a header here. So go into advanced and say first line of range contains column names. That was the ID row. We certainly have that. This will produce a data table called Excel data. Now hit save. Also close the Excel. So I do this and close the Excel and do not save the document. We have not done any changes in that, so I can hit save. If I go back to main and I run it, this will run the initialization, all the actions in here. Then we will come back here and do the API call. Right now this is quite fast, but if I don't want to run this, I could add a breakpoint here that will pause the automation here. Look what's happening. I just want to check that the Excel part is working. Now you will see that I have a stop here, and if I go to main, I can see it's stopped here and my automation has been paused. Then I can choose to continue or click stop, remove the breakpoint. What I want to see is to go to the right, double click the Excel data and see I can read this data. Make sure you have the ID up here. That was in the advanced in the read from Excel worksheet where we said our data has the headers. Now I want to connect to the API and do all lookups from all these rows. When we want to iterate a collection, here a data table, we're using a for each in Power Automate Desktop. I go to close again. Here you will find a for each. Drag it in before the Invoke web service. What do I want to iterate? Click the X to find your Excel data variable. Double click to open it. You could write it, but I prefer always to use this variable picker because then we don't make errors. Store into. That will be the name of the iteration. Choose whatever you want. I think it makes sense to call it the current row because we're iterating an Excel sheet. So this is the current row. That will be the first row, the second row, the third row, and so forth. Hit save. Then I also want to say, I want to do this Invoke web service for each one of these rows. So drag it in here. Right now, it will, for each one of these rows, it will just look up Darth Vader. I need to tell it to what data do I have in this ID column of the current row. I know we only have one currently. I do that by opening up the Invoke web service, delete this for, pick the variable picker, say current row, and then I want to say in hard brackets and a single quotation marks, go look in the ID column. So now we are looking up, we're reading the Excel, we're looping the rows, and we do an API call for each row. Let us have a breakpoint again, and let's run it. Then we will see that if I go to the main, we have done the first API call. I can also see that this is a 200, and if I double click the web service response, here I have the Luke Skywalker. Let's run again. Now we did our next one. That will be the C3PO. I can do the third one. This is just to inspect R2D2. Now we can see it works. So what I can do is to remove the breakpoint, and once I click run here, it will do all the API calls. But look what's happening on the last iteration. We got a 404. This is an error. And if I look in the web service response, we have a format that we cannot use. Why is that? Well, look at the Excel data. So double click here. This was an ID that didn't exist in the API. So here I tried to call an ID that didn't exist. In the real world, this was probably me trying to find an ID of a customer that wasn't in the system, or a name, or whatever I looked up. So we need to handle that, and we will do that later. Let me close here again. I also want to, once I have done this API call, and let me just first one again, then I want to pass the data. I want to say I need to use this, and if I just stop it here, that was for the first iteration, move the breakpoint, and if I go over to the web service response, here I can see I have a few keys, for example, the name, the height, the mass. I want the name out, I want the birth year out as well. What we do here is to convert this JSON into a custom object. A custom object in Power Automate Desktop is like a dictionary if you know programming. These are just key value pairs. That makes it easier to look up the key. Since we want to look up the name key and the birth year key, we want to make that easy. Close. Here you will find a convert and pick the convert JSON to custom object. What JSON do I want to pass? Well, that will be the web service response from up here. Double click that. This will produce a custom object called JSON as custom object. I hit save. Again, I could add the breakpoint. Then I can run it. I just want to see that I can pass it in a nice format. So if I go to the JSON as custom object and double click that, you will now see that this is a dictionary. Now I can say, go look up in this dictionary, give me the name, and I will get the Luke Skywalker back. So this just made it easy for us. I can hit stop. Then I want to say, how do I want to save this data? And yes, don't worry, we will fix the error once we get there. Remove the breakpoint again. In the initialization, I will initialize a data table. I will do it with a set variable that's easily configurable. So go up and add a set variable. We will call this one results. And in the value to initialize a data table, you want 2 percentage signs, you want 2 curly brackets, and you want 2 hard brackets. Then I also want to say that I want to initialize this data table. Right now I'm just doing the headers row. So I'm making a head before the curly brackets. Now I define which columns I want in this data table. This will be an ID and comma, name. The reason why we do these single quotation marks around them is because this one is text. These are not variables. Birth year. These are the things that I want to change. When I hit save here, and if I see a syntax error, That means that you didn't write it like me, so you probably forgot a comma or a single quotation mark. Go look that up. And then I click save. So if I go to the main, that is, here we're iterating to this Excel data. We also know that the ID is in this current row, whereas the name and birth year, that will be in the response from the API call. So if I go to the initialization, here we have this result written in. That means that in the ID, I want the ID from their Excel, that is from the iteration, and I want the name and birth year from the actual API call. Go back to the main. Then I want to say, give me the ID. I want to use a variable for this, and I can do that just before this Invoke web service. Let's just say ID. Find the current row, and in hard brackets, single quotation marks, do like this. Now we have an ID variable. We could of course use this expression. Then you could also change it down here if you want that, because we already used this expression just to make it a little bit nicer to look at. Then we use the ID. Then I also want to say, after I convert this to a custom object, then I want to drag out the name and the birth year. And this is really, really nice and simple. Set variable. Now I want to find the name. I do that by going to value, click the X, JSON as custom object, and in hard bracket, single quotation marks, say name, and a hard bracket. That's it. Then I want to do the same with the birth year. Here I say birth year. I want to look in the JSON as custom object, hard bracket, and then it was something like birth year. This is what it comes back as in the API call. So I do like this and hit save. Then I also want to say, so once I have done the API call, I now have an ID, I have a name and a birth year. I also want to save it into the results in the data table. So I add a row into the results. I can do that by a set variable. Here I will call this one results. This will be a data table. So how do I do that? Well, I click the X and say, I want whatever is in the results. That is, if this is the second iteration or the third, I want the preceding rows. So I say, whatever is in the results plus, and then I will create a list. I want to use the ID, click the X, that will be the first column. Do this. Since it's a variable, we will not need percentage signs except from the start and the beginning of this code block. Then I want a name and a birth year. Do like this. And the birth year. You can see here I make spaces after the comma. These are just ignored. You can find not do it. I just find it's a bit more readable to you. I do it like this, and then I hit save. Now we can run and inspect. What will happen here is that we will get an error in the last one, but I will see that the results will be added to the first 9 ones, and this is fine expected. We could not convert this. That will be the last iteration. When I look at the results here, you can now see that we have fetched the data nicely, except for the last row. If you like this, please give this video a thumbs up. That will really help me a lot. Thank you. Now let's handle the error. Because what we can do here is that if we know that the status code for an API call for success is 200, that means that I only want to do this, and this here if we actually get a status code 200 back. So after the Invoke web service, I can ask a question. I can do that with an if up here in conditionals. So after the Invoke web service, here I want to ask, is this status code here, is this equal to 200? Then I want to do all this. I can drag the end down. So now if the status code is 200, then I'll perform this, otherwise nothing. And let's try to run it just to see that this actually works. Now we will get no errors. Now the flow doesn't stop, although we still have this status code. We still have an error in the last, but now we handle it so our flow doesn't stop. Imagine that this was like the 4th or the 5th, then we will only get results down there. So this is nice, but now I also want to log a status. Whether that will be a success or an error, then we want to handle. So what I can do here is that I want to separate it. So here I already have, if this is status code 200, then something will happen, and then we will also do an else. First, let's in the initialization, go in here and double click it. So I want to add another column to this one here. So I'll say comma. You can see it's quite easy to update. That will be a status. And we do this. Now I go back to the main. I already see that this is a little bit cluttered here. So what if we just mark all this? You can click this, press shift and click the end. Then we say Control X. Now we will use a subflow here as well. So go into a new subflow. Let's call this one all API. Hit save. Then you just do a Control V. Now we also need to call the subflow. So we did that with a run subflow here. Yeah. So we just repeat this process. Now it's a little bit more beauty to look at. So then I also want to say down here, we added this status. Then I also want to say in here, I want to log the results, ID, name, birth year. Double click to open it. I also want to have a status variable in here. So we want to create a status variable, set it to success if we're up here. And if it's an error, we want to log the status code, for example. This means that I will drag this set variable out of the for each in the if, sorry. Then up here, I can do an else. And else says this happens if the status code is 200, else something happened here. So what I want to do up here, I know that this is a success because the status code is 200. So I say set variable, drag it in, and let's say status success, like this, with not C for properly, like this. So now we have a success. Then we can also add that to here. So after the birth year, have a comma, and then we find the success variable. Right now it is not there. What did I do wrong? That was, of course, we want the status variable. I hope you enjoyed this live coding, because you get all my thoughts while I develop this one here. So now we have the status here. Then we can talk a little bit about what do I want if this is an error. Well, then I just want a blank in the name and a blank in the birth year, and then some kind of a customized error message. So what I want to do here is to mark all of this tree, click the first one, hold shift, take this one, say Control C, go to the end, Control V, that is to reuse them. So in the name, what do I want as the name value? I just want an empty value. You can do that by making a percentage signs, one single quotation mark, another one, and a percentage sign. Like this, we want nothing in it. In the birth year, I want to do the same and hit save. Then we want a status message that is not a success. Here I can, for example, say error with the status code, and we can customize it a lot, and then just add the status code and do like this, and everything will be logged down here. We will still have the ID, but we will have no name and birth year when we are up here. Remember to save your flow. We have developed a lot. Then we can run it. Now I want to test that we also log the error here. So when I go to the results, you will see that we have now logged this 84. We have no name and birth year. Great. And we have the error with the status code 404. Bingo. We have that. Then let's also save the results back to the Excel. That's nice because we have a data table that will be fairly easy. Create a new subflow. So I go up here, have an end subflow. This is what's happening when all flow is done. Let's create a new Excel instance and drag it in. Here I want to write to a blank document. We will call this one Excel instance results. Hit save. Now when having a data table, I cannot write out both the headers and the data, so we will write first the headers and then the data. Or we could, but that will be a little bit complicated. So drag in a write to Excel worksheet. The Excel instance, now we have two. That will be the results. What do I want to write? Click the X up here. And then I want to find the actual results here. Because now we are writing in the results. And then we say the column headers row. Where do I want to write it? In A1. Because we have columns, it will sort it in the Excel columns as well. Then we want to have another one. Again, I want to write in the Excel instance results. What do I want to write? Well, that will be the results here. Where do I want to write it? That will be in A2. Hit save. Now I also want to close Excel. That will mean to save the data. So find a close Excel. And this will be the Excel instance results. Save document as. Where do I want to save it? Well, hit this little X here. In the project path, have a backward slash and call it something like results.xlsx. Then you want to hit save. Then we also need to go into the main to call this end. We will only do it once. That is, once we have collected all this data, then we can write it back to the Excel. Find the run subflow, drag it in the end, and choose the subflow called end. Now let's try to run it. And then what I want to see is that I can save it into a separate Excel. Yeah, we have it. And if I go to the folder on my desktop, you will now see that we also have a result.xlsx. Here we have our data, and if we do this, we have it nicely formatted. Your next video is about advanced Microsoft Power Automate desktop. It will take you to every concept that you need to learn. It's right here.